Hello everyone and welcome back to the Aether Hub for another Magic the Gathering video. Today we are continuing our official adventure through the plane of Zendikar with the latest story from Zendikar Rising. Things certainly took a darker turn last week as we saw Nahiri, once the Grand Protector of Zendikar who sacrificed so much for her world's safety, seemingly falling off the edge of sanity as she murdered those in her own adventuring party. All so she could achieve her goal. That goal being to restore Zendikar to a state before the Eldrazi Titans, before the Royal put the world's citizens at constant risk of random smushings. However good her intentions may have been, her drive to expel the soul of Zendikar no matter the cost has put her at odds with another of this plane's protectors, the elf Nissa Revane. Now this confrontation meets its focal point as Nissa, Nahiri, and their differing ideologies finally collide in Chapter 4, The Haunting Songs and Whispered Warnings. Remember to catch any of the previous chapter breakdowns here on the channel, click the banner on your screen right now or find the link to the playlist in your description below. Also make sure to tick the notification bell for this channel so you're reminded every time we come out with a new video. And with that, let's begin. We start Chapter 4 where we left off with Chapter 3. The famous rope slinger of Zendikar, Akiri, a core who joined Nahiri and the rest of her company, now falling helplessly through the sky. Nahiri herself had put Akiri in this precarious position, having pushed her from the very edge of the Marasa Skyclave personally. Though hired to aid Nahiri, Akiri had a change of heart after discovering what the lithoform core was actually capable of. Nahiri wants to use it to kill the Royal on Zendikar, but in doing so, would also kill all living things around it. This was proven in the death of her friend, Xerath. The last thing Akiri saw, other than the endless sky, was her friend's cold, dead face, sapped of all life by Nahiri and this artifact. Though very experienced at falling, Akiri hadn't before felt so desperate. There was no hope left, as she raced past the final floating hedron just out of reach of her ropes. With nothing else to grasp, Akiri braced for the impact of the earth and her demise. With a thud and a sudden stop, Akiri reflected on just how painless death was, opening her eyes expecting to see nothing but darkness. To her shock, she was still very much alive, stuck in the bramble of a tree. Surely she was falling far too hard and fast for loose branches to stop her descent without harm. And she was right. The branch, it moved, cradling her as much as possible, as an elf reached out to her. It was Nissa. Nissa and JACE too were climbing the Marasa Skyclave, looking to halt Nahiri and her plan, and spotting a falling adventurer, Nissa instinctively looked to help the poor soul. With their introductions done, JACE and Nissa learned that Nahiri had claimed the lithoform core and looked to release its power across Zendikar. Akiri, plagued by the death of her friend, also described how the relic didn't distinguish between elementals and other living beings. Her heart swelled with regret, anger, and remorse. Though Nissa and JACE wanted to push forward to confront Nahiri, they found that their target was much closer than they believed. They spotted Nahiri making her own descent from the Skyclave, surely to wherever location would be best to set off the device. Nissa let loose a volley of thorn arrows in Nahiri's direction, but the planeswalker dancing on summoned pillars of rock was far too distant to reach with such an attack. Nahiri spotted her enemies, old and new alike, and retaliated with an attack of her own, throwing boulders towards where the group huddled. Nahiri then was losing concentration, her steps were misplaced, and her lithomancy stopped. Very unlike the ancient core. She held her hands to her head. It was JACE, attacking Nahiri's mind with a mental assault. Even so, Nahiri composed herself enough to launch another massive rock towards JACE, who didn't even notice the attack. Akiri anticipated it and tackled JACE out of its path. Together they fell from the tree, but this time, Akiri could control her fall, as she had done countless times before, throwing rope over rope, connecting limbs and rocks, and hurling her and JACE both back up to safety, just in time to watch Nahiri make her escape. They turn to Akiri asking her about Nahiri's plan, but she doesn't know any new information. She doesn't know where Nahiri's going, just that she's dangerous and fiercely determined to see this thing through. Luckily, JACE was able to peer into Nahiri's thoughts during his attack. The Singing City, that's all that she was thinking as she escaped. The Singing City is a series of ruins not far from where they were, the remains of an ancient core city, those responsible for crafting this lithoform core. With that, Nissa ran off without Akiri or JACE, realizing time was crucial to prevent the relic's use and that JACE was just going to slow her down. She was gone before JACE could even protest. JACE wanted to help his friend, and his only hope would be this Akiri person. But Akiri was no longer in the adventuring mood. She had betrayed her instincts when she took the job from Nahiri, and in doing so betrayed her friend Zareth. He was dead. This job was her decision. His blood was on her hands, though the true fault still lied with his murderer, Nahiri. Akiri didn't want to help JACE, still fearing for the lives of her other companions, Aura and Kaza. JACE, however, was able to use his telepathy to locate them, safe and sound in a nearby village. With Akiri's primary concern addressed, vengeance for Zareth again took center stage. Akiri agreed to lead JACE to the Singing City, however, she wouldn't enter with him. Rumors of that place were well circulated on Zendikar. It said all those who venture in are driven mad. She would help JACE as far as its gates, in the memory of Zareth, but no further. Together they reached the entrance to the forbidden Singing City. The entrance was disturbed, signaling to JACE and Akiri that Nissa, Nahiri, or both had made it here already. This is where Akiri's leg of the journey would come to an end. She hoped that JACE and Nissa could stop Nahiri, if for anything, to avenge Zareth. But she also knew the extent of her own abilities. She had fought against the Eldrazi and their spawn, the whole of Zendikar did, but these planeswalkers, they dabbled in powers far beyond her comprehension. JACE was left alone to enter the maddening ruins, with only one piece of advice to guide him: don't listen to the whispers. As JACE makes his way through the strangely maze-like corridors of the Singing City, JACE had to remind himself not to dwell on the angling puzzle before him. As much as he wanted to solve it, this place wasn't safe and he needed to find Nissa fast. He hears the faint humming of an offbeat, off-pitched song, voices he couldn't understand, and a type of music that scraped at his ears. Still, it was faint, distant. He shrugged it off. But a more immediate and dangerous sound soon confronted him. It was Nahiri, approaching him from behind, magic at the ready. JACE was caught in an ambush, but Nahiri didn't spring right for the kill. JACE inquired about the core she carried, the thing Nissa believed would destroy all of Zendikar, attempting to persuade Nahiri not to use a power she didn't understand. Nahiri is personally offended, knowing full well that Nissa was the one who let the Titans free on Zendikar in the first place, just because she felt it was right. Now the elf believed this relic was not in the best interest of Zendikar? With her checkered past, Nahiri was hesitant to accept her opinion. JACE wasn't fooled. He sensed in her some fear, not for herself but for Zendikar. Nahiri too played a role in the world's suffering, agreeing to imprison the Eldrazi hero in the first place, a hypocrisy JACE was keen to point out, much to Nahiri's dismay. No matter how much JACE reasoned with Nahiri, her determination was resolute. JACE again peered into Nahiri's mind, finding her vision of Zendikar, one free of the Roil, where its people built beautiful and grand cities much like his home on Ravnica. People were happy and at peace. This is what Nahiri wanted for her world, something even he believed Nissa would support if they could just open a dialogue. Still, JACE protested the core's use. It was dangerous, and if Nahiri used it at the center of the Singing City, a convergence of mana ley lines for Zendikar, it could obliterate the entire plane. They needed to study it. JACE asks Nahiri to come back with him to Ravnica. There, they could examine it, discover how to use it appropriately to achieve her goal. Nahiri wasn't buying it. All she saw was another threat, looking to steal the core. She attacked. As she summoned two jagged rocks on either side of JACE and plunged them inwards, the telepath quickly manifested a barrier of magic around him, slowing the stone just enough for him to roll out of the way. Anticipating another quick follow-up, JACE conjured an army of illusionary JACEs, mirror images meant to confuse and misdirect her next attack. But that attack never came. Killing JACE was not Nahiri's goal. As he spots her running off deeper into the Singing City, he picks himself up and chases after her. As they race towards the center of the ruins, JACE notices the humming getting louder and louder. First it was a nuisance, next it was unbearable, and finally it was crippling. The sound entered his ears, but immobilized his very joints. He crumbled to the floor without a thought able to penetrate this endless noise. This is what drove so many explorers mad, and it looked like even JACE's mind could break. He had to do something quickly, a new spell yet untested, but it was his only hope. It was a simple enough spell, a magical incantation to ward all sound. He originally cooked it up to prevent manipulation or mental assaults from Nicol Bolas. Here, it worked in a similar fashion, freeing his ears from the hum and giving JACE full control of his body once again. He raced to where he lost track of Nahiri, expecting to find the planeswalker near the city's center, but instead, he found her too crumpled on the ruins floor, overtaken by the whispers of the singing city. Jace expanded his spell to encompass Nahiri as well, sparing her from that agony of madness, but he would find no thanks. However, they were able to again begin a dialogue, another chance to convince Nahiri of the right thing to do for Zendikar. Though Nahiri saw Jace as a disturbance to her plans, a meddler as she put it, she had to agree that she didn't know what would happen if she activated the device at the focal point on Zendikar, an unknown Jace was able to exploit. Nahiri doesn't want to harm Zendikar further, so Jace made an agreement. Her goal was just, and he would allow Nahiri to move forward, but only after they've studied the lithoform core together. Nahiri seemingly agrees. A loose truce is made, and together the pair went to the focal point of the Singing City together, not to activate the relic, but to examine what possibilities may exist. As this unlikely pair entered the very center of the leyline convergence, the middle of the Singing City, Nahiri spots a toppled stone gazebo, exuding an energy so similar to the magic held within the lithoform core. This was it. The spot where she would, eventually, save Zendikar from the Roil. But something was wrong. Off. Outside of the increasing frequency of the whispers coming from the relic itself. Where this thing would typically be placed, it was destroyed. Not just destroyed, but uprooted. The ley line was shattered. This spot was now useless. How could this have happened in this cursed city? The culprit hovered above the ruined gazebo. Nissa, another young meddler when compared to Nahiri's ageless experience. She stood carried in the branches of the biggest elemental Nahiri or Jace had ever seen, a formidable force Nissa referred to as Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, one of her oldest, deepest companions she's ever forged from Zendikar. Even at this point, in this position, despite Nahiri's constant jabs at Nissa's intentions in stopping her restoration of Zendikar, Jace attempts to broker peace. Nissa has destroyed the focal point, thus Nahiri has no way to activate the relic on a plane-wide scale. However, Nahiri's vision of a Zendikar at peace aligns with what Nissa also wants. There must be a way to understand this device, to know its power and to control it, for the benefit of all. Nissa, however, saw a different perspective. The use of this device would kill the elementals, Ashaya, her friend. She would not allow it. Nahiri again jabs that her Zendikar is strong, while Jace tries to rationalize with Nissa. These are plants, they're just plants. They would grow back, but the world left behind would be like Ravnica. Wouldn't that be wonderful? He believed that what's best for Ravnica is what's best for every world. That Nissa would feel the same way of the murder of her friends as Jace would to the chopping down of a tree. All Nissa saw was her ally, Jace, standing alongside her enemy. Jace had betrayed her. The idea of this elf, this tree dweller, so young, relatively speaking, telling Nahiri what she had to do to her world, the world she's sacrificed so much for, that she's protected for thousands of years, pushed Nahiri over the edge. Despite Jace's pleas for peace, the Lithomancer attacked Nissa, throwing a shower of sharp stones, swords of molten rock, right at the Animist. Quicker than she could expect, the elemental blocked the oncoming assault with a thick branch, making no noise of distress and showing no signs of damage, simply waiting silently for Nissa's command. Again, fast, Ashaya slams where Jace and Nahiri was standing, with the pair barely diving out of the way. This thing was huge, strong, and fast. Nahiri was prideful and hated Nissa with a fiery passion, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of fear. Nissa was powerful, far more than she had given her credit. Nahiri had faced Elder Dragons, Eldrazi Titans, and an immortal vampire. Surely a single elf shouldn't be a problem. But Nissa's trials had been just as, if not more, arduous. She would find no easy kill here, as Jace watched on with sadness. Nahiri could not contend with the power of this elemental, and rather than die in a worthless effort, she decided to take Jace and retreat, something that didn't sit well with the ancient core. Together they raced out of the Singing City, attacking smaller shrub elementals Nissa had summoned to block their path. As they break out of the clearing to the entrance, there, standing in all her magnificence, Nissa Revane, moving far faster with the power of Zendikar itself than they could ever hope to outrun. Nahiri could no longer run. The weight of this encounter finally dawned on her. As stones shifted around her and an army of elementals stand ready for Nissa, this would be the battle for the soul of Zendikar. Wow, okay, the story for Zendikar Rising is actually taking some turns I really didn't expect, but I really like. Certainly Nahiri going straight evil would have been a little anticlimactic and really wouldn't have done her character much justice. Chapter 4 here puts a little more nuance to her development. Yes, she is prideful, oppressive, thick-headed, and stubborn, but while she would kill innocent people for Zendikar, she isn't willing to hurt the world itself, stopping just short of using the lithoform core to learn more about it at JACE's behest. On the other hand, Nissa is feeling betrayed by JACE, much like she had felt with the Gatewatch in the past. This brings up a lot of old wounds. Nissa felt betrayed by the group bringing in Liliana Vess, believing that she was still very much evil. Now JACE betrays her again, for no other reason than he sort of just sees where Nahiri's coming from. Talk about questionable loyalties. Now we head to a titanic battle in the next chapter. Nissa and Nahiri duking it out. What can and will JACE do to prevent the destruction of either of them, or of Zendikar? Anyway, that's gonna do it for this video and chapter 4 of Zendikar Rising. Remember to check the description for a link to the playlist if you missed any of our previous chapters, and take that notification bell so you don't miss out when we release the next chapter. As always guys, thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see ya!